Suspected United Healthcare killer Luigi Mangione has been charged with terrorism. But why? And also, why are federal prosecutors also indicting and prosecuting Mangione? Well, a New York State grand jury indicted Mangione on multiple charges related to the December 4th, 2024 shooting death of United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson. The charges included first-degree murder in the furtherance of terrorism and second-degree murder as a crime of terrorism, as well as additional counts of criminal possession of a weapon and possession of a forged instrument. Now, the terrorism charges are notable. The prosecutors argued that Mangione committed the murder to intimidate or coerce a civilian population or influence government policy, violating New York's anti-terrorism statutes. Mangione has been extradited to New York to face these charges. His attorney, Karen Friedman Agnifilo, has indicated plans to contest the charges, asserting that DA Alvin Bragg overcharged Mangione. At the time of his arrest, authorities found a 3D printed ghost gun, a suppressor, and a handwritten manifesto expressing animosity towards the US healthcare system. Now, as usual for my substantive questions about New York criminal law, I've reached out to former AUSA and current New York criminal defense lawyer Mitch Epner about the indictments and why the feds are involved. So Mitchell, what we have here looks like a pretty straightforward murder case, so why would Alvin Bragg decide to add the terrorism charge?
Well, let me start, Devin, by agreeing with you. This is a very strange choice by the prosecution. They may have managed to indict Mr. Mangione for the one crime that he has a good defense to. The reason for bringing a murder one charge, which is a very particular thing under New York law, as opposed to a murder two charge, is I think they want the headlines of saying that they charged him with murder one as opposed to murder two. And we can talk in a moment about what the substantive differences are between them. But the most basic difference in terms of if they get a conviction is if he is convicted of murder one under these circumstances, the required punishment will be life without the possibility of parole. Whereas if he's only convicted of murder two without the special circumstances of terrorism, there would be the possibility that 20 years down the road, he would be eligible for parole. Having said that, I cannot imagine a circumstance under which Mr. Mangione would be considered a good candidate for parole at any point in his life.
Is there any substantive difference between murder two and murder one with the terrorism charge?
Yeah, that's the big thing. There is a difference in penalty because if convicted of murder one on the basis of terrorism, then the penalty is required to be life without possibility of parole.
Okay, and if Mangione is convicted of murder two and was up for parole, do you think he would be continually denied?
I think it's the latter. I think that if he is convicted on murder two, and he lives long enough to see his parole date, there would be a pro forma parole hearing 20 years from now, 30 years from now, and it would be like the early scenes in Shawshank Redemption where they just rubber stamped denied each time.
What makes someone a good or bad candidate for parole?
A bad candidate for parole is somebody who committed a crime of violence, check, who did it with malice aforethought, check, and who seemed to show no remorse, check. No matter what he does in the future, I cannot imagine a situation where a parole board would say this man, Luigi Mangione, appears to have understood that what he did was wrong, since he seems so clearly at this moment to believe that what he did was right.
So what does the prosecution need to prove for murder one with the terrorism aggravated factor on top of what they would normally need to show for murder in the second degree?
So murder in the second degree is very simple. You intended to kill somebody. You did it intentionally, you didn't do it in self-defense. That is as open and shut a case as I can imagine, because they have Mr. Mangione doing it on videotape, approaching somebody from behind, shooting him 3 times, starting in his leg, and then shooting him twice in the back. And I take at face value the public disclosures that they have many different ways to tie Mr. Mangione to the murder, including the fact that he was found in possession of the murder weapon. So that is as open and shut a murder 2 case as I can imagine. Murder 1, on the other hand, will require proof as to what Mr. Mangione was thinking at the time he did this. And they would have to prove, and I'm reading now, intent to intimidate or coerce a civilian population, influence the policy of a unit of government by intimidation or coercion, or affect the conduct of a unit of government. And that is a very hard thing to prove. They will have to prove that when he killed Mr. Thompson, he didn't do it because he hated Mr. Thompson alone, or because he hated the way Mr. Thompson ran United Healthcare alone, but rather that he had some broader policy agenda to intimidate people in order to change the way in which government worked or the general populace conducted themselves. That's a very hard thing to do. One of the basic things that I was taught as a trial practitioner is keep it simple, stupid. The KISS principle. If you can win your case by proving 4 things, don't try to increase the degree of difficulty by proving 12 things. The increase in what they have to prove here is enormous, and I think it violates the KISS principle very fundamentally.
It's reported that Mangioni's manifesto reads, quote, "Frankly, these parasites simply had it coming. A reminder, the US has the #1 most expensive healthcare system in the world, yet we rank roughly 42 in life expectancy. United is the indecipherable largest company in the US by market cap, behind only Apple, Google, Walmart. It has grown and grown, but has our life expectancy. No, the reality is this indecipherable have simply gotten too powerful, and that they continue to abuse our country for immense profit because the American public has allowed them to get away with it. Obviously, the problem is more complex, but I do not have the space, and frankly, I do not pretend to be the most qualified person to lay out the full argument, but many have illuminated the corruption and greed decades ago, and the problems simply remain. It is not an issue of awareness at this point, but clearly power games at play. Evidently, I am the first to face it with such brutal honesty." So is it possible that a jury could look at these writings and conclude beyond reasonable doubt that by executing the CEO of United Healthcare, he did intend to bring about some kind of change in US healthcare for the purposes of the terrorism aggravated factor?
They'd have to prove much more than that. They would have to prove not just that he intended to bring about change, but that he intended to do it by intimidating the people in the government. It's not enough to raise the issue and say, hey, here are the things that I think are bad about United Healthcare, why I'm deciding to kill this person. But they essentially have to put the people in government in fear that if they don't act to make the changes that he's advocating, that they will get killed also. That's what a terrorism enhancement looks like.
Now, obviously, if you're charged with terrorism, you'll want a good lawyer. But if you want a great lawyer, let my law firm, the Eagle Team, help. If you've gotten in a car crash, suffered a data breach, especially if you got a data breach letter saying your information might have been leaked, or are dealing with a workers' comp or social security issue, we can represent you or help find you the right attorney. Because it's so important to talk to a lawyer right away so you can maximize your recovery. And by the way, we don't get paid unless you do, so there's nothing up front. So just click on the link in the description or call the phone number on screen for a free consultation with my team. Because you don't just need a legal team, you need the Eagle Team. It seems to me that one reason of including murder in the first degree with the terrorism aggravated factor is that the prosecution's very confident that they will get a conviction on murder too, which is a lesser included offense. What do you think about that?
That's possible. I think it's also highly possible that they've done it because they want the headlines of saying they're seeking murder in the first degree.
Now, by bringing in this terrorism charge, is it possible that the prosecutors are making their lives unnecessarily difficult in a way that might backfire?
So there are a couple of additional thoughts. One is that the problem for the prosecution in doing it this way is when they make his intent not just relevant, but an element of the crime, they're going to give him, if they go to trial, the world's biggest soapbox to say all of these things. And that is raising the possibility of jury nullification. Jurors may or may not agree with what he did. Some jurors might identify with Mr. Thompson, but some jurors might think that United Healthcare is a really awful organization and have sympathy with Mr. Mangione, or at least Mr. Mangione's grievances against United Healthcare. All of that could have been kept out of a Murder 2 trial, and all of that would have to come into a Murder 1 trial. And then the second thing is Mr. Mangione has, as his attorney, Karen Friedman Agnifilo, who is a veteran, was a veteran of about 30 years in the Manhattan DA's office. She left relatively recently. She is as well-versed, well-connected, and well-experienced a lawyer as you're going to find. And I suspect that any good defense argument she will raise. They do not have a walkover here. They have a very skilled advocate on the other side.
And any idea when this trial will be scheduled and actually take place?
I have no idea when trial will take place. I am certain that the defense, given the fact that Mr. Mangione will be held without bail, almost certainly at Rikers, which is about as bad a place as you can find on the planet, will want to have trial as quickly as possible.
Thanks, Mitch, but hold tight because I have a few questions about the federal prosecution as well. Now, the Department of Justice has also indicted Mangione of murder through the use of a firearm, 2 stalking charges, and a firearms offense. The federal prosecutors claimed jurisdiction because Mangione traveled in interstate commerce when he took a bus from Atlanta to New York before the shooting. And the indictment alleges that he used interstate facilities by using a cell phone and the internet to plan and carry out the stalking, shooting, and killing of Brian Thompson in the vicinity of West 54th Street and 6th Avenue in Manhattan. And as part of that showing, they charged Mangione with 2 counts of stalking. Basically, the federal prosecutors seem to be establishing that they have jurisdiction for the prosecution. Now, some of the highlights of the affidavit by FBI agent David Cobb include a photograph of the gun that agents found with Mangione, a handwritten diary with entries such as, quote, "I'm glad in a way that I've procrastinated because it allowed me to learn more about acronym for company number 1. The notebook entry also stated that the target is insurance because it checks every box. And quote, the investor conference is a true windfall, and most importantly, the message becomes self-evident. And later on in the entry, the notebook describes an intent to, quote, whack the CEO of one of the insurance companies at the investor conference. There's also a letter addressed to the, quote, feds, which reads, quote, I wasn't working with anyone. This was fairly trivial, some elementary social engineering, basic CAD, and a lot of patience. The Fed letter also states, quote, P.S. You can check serial numbers to verify this is all self-funded, my own ATM withdrawals. Now, needless to say, this does not look good for Mangione from a criminal defense perspective. So let's go back to Mitch Epner. Mitch, why do you think it was important for the feds to indict for the same conduct here?
I would absolutely expect that once the Trump administration is in place, that they will seek the death penalty against Mr. Mangione, which is, as I just said, a penalty that would not be available if there were prosecution under New York state law.
And who's likely to prosecute first, the federal government or the state?
I know for a fact that there are laws and rules about how the decision gets made by the courts about which prosecution goes first. I imagine that over the next few weeks and months, that will be sorted out. Ordinarily, this gets sorted out by an agreement amongst the prosecutors about which case will go first. So under those circumstances, ordinarily you would expect that the state and the feds would decide who went first. Here, given the relationship between the New York law enforcement authorities who prosecuted Donald Trump only recently in the Manhattan DA's office and the Trump DOJ, I'm not certain that that will be a easy conversation. We'll keep paying attention.
Thanks so much, Mitch. It's always incredible to talk to people who have a completely different point of reference when it comes to the law. Now, this video was only possible with the help of today's sponsor, Nebula. Now, my first video on the United Health murder and Luigi Mangione was completely demonetized and age-gated on YouTube. 1.1 million people watched the first video in the first day, and then basically no one else saw it afterwards. In that video, I showed the surveillance footage, and apparently YouTube didn't like that, which is crazy because it was blurred, and according to community guidelines, it shouldn't have been a problem. But I don't have to worry about that on Nebula, the streaming site that my friends and I created from scratch. On Nebula, you can watch all of our videos ad-free and early because our videos always go up on Nebula first. Plus, there's tons of exclusive content, and for a limited time, you can get a lifetime membership. You can buy once and then never again. It's the greatest deal of all. And if you're new here, Nebula includes tons of exclusive videos from me, original series from your favorite people, movies, plays, classes, and more. I've heard it described as Netflix for people who like trains, with your favorites like Johnny Harris, Neo, Jet Lag, Real Engineering, Real Life Lore, and your most favorite, LegalEagle. And exclusives on Nebula are incredible. Recently, I was watching the Rift Tracks commentary of Plan 9 from Outer Space. It was a perfect video for Halloween, and I'm really looking forward to the film that my friend Patrick Willems is creating called The Dinner Plan, filled with people that you've probably seen before. And you can see exclusive LegalEagle videos like my documentary, Bad Law Words Good, and other content that just wouldn't fit on YouTube, like my full-length interview with the screenwriter, my cousin Vinny, and the Not Safe for Work video about lawsuits that are too hot for YouTube. Because what's truly special about Nebula is that it's a creator-owned platform built by me and other YouTubers and podcasters, and because it's a subscription service, we get to work on larger, higher-budget productions than we ever could anywhere else. It's becoming the answer to the question, how do you get Hollywood-level production value without Hollywood-level BS? And for those of you that want to share everything Nebula has to offer with your friends and family this holiday season, Nebula is now offering annual gift cards. So if you sign up using the link that's on screen right now, you can give a year of Nebula to a friend for 40% off the yearly subscription. That's a year of the best content for just $36. And it's a gift that you can give to yourself, by the way, because you deserve it. So get 40% off of you or a friend's yearly subscription for just $36, or you can check out the lifetime deal where for $300, you get access to Nebula forever. Now we're investing in more big concept, high octane Nebula originals, and your lifetime subscription goes towards that investment. In a way, lifetime is the best possible deal of all. But either way, you'll get all my videos early, get access to exclusives, and support the ambitious projects that my friends and I are working on our own streaming site. So sign up now and get you or a friend 40% off of Nebula, or get the incredible lifetime deal by clicking on the link below. And after that, click on this link over here for more LegalEagle, or I'll see you in court.